Basically, no one played Star Wars Outlaws.
Well, Aqua, actually, I did play it.
And yeah, okay, I played it too, sorry for being hyperbolic. But to be a bit less sensational, not enough people played Star Wars Outlaws. If not by the general lack of discussion surrounding the game, then by the sales, which Ubisoft themselves conceded was a disappointment. But why? How? I mean, this is a Star Wars product, and even games like Jedi Survivor, a game that was broken for many players on launch and even to this day doesn't run the best, in spite of such a poor launch, was able to make enough to warrant a sequel that is rumored to be in development. I'm sure your first guess is that it's Ubisoft, and of course, their reputation had a part to play here, but I think the explanation for the game's financial failure is deeper than it being bad, because for as much as no one wants to hear the words good and Ubisoft in any sentence without riddance in the middle, Outlaws is a shockingly solid game. A Magnum Opus? No. But certainly not deserving of its fate, at least when it comes to the game's actual quality. I think the greatest misstep of Outlaws is the marketing, but the story is bigger than that, because bad marketing alone can't kill a title. As always, this is the result of a storm of decisions, and of course, those decisions are surrounded by the context of this being a Ubisoft game, which already frames people's perception of the game. When it was first rumored that Ubisoft was making an open-world Star Wars game, many were skeptical, because Ubisoft in recent years had grown complacent, especially in open world design, where they once were at the forefront of innovation. Ubisoft made the blueprint for open world games with titles like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry 3, but then became comfortable doing the same thing over and over, or at least that's what its detractors believe, and to most consumers, the same is true. I think most Ubisoft games are unique in their own ways, for better or worse, but when so many of them are pitched the same way, an open world with the choice of stealth or combat, with neither system being fully fleshed out, it's easy to see a pattern, even if the games suffering from those assumptions have more beneath the surface. So we have some goals here. 1. Is Outlaws a bad game, and why? 2. Who or what's to blame for Outlaws' financial failure? And 3. What can Ubisoft do moving forward to avoid those same mistakes? After nearly a year, 9 months as of writing, Outlaws has changed significantly since launch. Systems have been tweaked, glitches have been fixed, and expansions have been added. So this video will be covering where the game is now, primarily because I can actually show the things I'm referring to, but also because seeing where the game is now, i.e. where the game could have been on launch had they delayed it, is imperative to the biggest issue with the game, which is just how unpolished it was and is. This is why no one played Star Wars Outlaws, and why now you might want to. For the uninitiated, Star Wars Outlaws stars Kay Vess and her little friend Nyx as they end up with a bounty on their heads after a heist gone wrong, and now need to assemble a new heist crew for a job that will pay her enough credits to leave her old life behind. I want to mention that I did receive a review code about 3 weeks after launch from Ubisoft on PS5, and then another one in November for PC, so bear that in mind. However, at the end of the day, this isn't really a review, and my goal here isn't to inform you on whether you should buy the game or not. Speaking of which, if you do plan on buying Outlaws, then be warned because there will be spoilers ahead. Marketing plays a big role in a game's financial success. I know, big revelations on the channel, but it's true. Even bad games can sell like hotcakes if it has a nice trailer and fills the right niche. Remember, Anthem still made $100 million. Marketing isn't just trailers though, as it is creating brand presence. I'm sorry, this might be cynical, but 99% of the games where you can pet the dog are simply there because they know it's a free 1,000 upvotes on r/gaming. Now, I don't want to speak too specifically here because truth be told, I don't have a marketing degree and I have no business or marketing experience outside of this YouTube channel. So keep in mind that a lot of this is based on my own outsider observations. In my opinion, there are 2 kinds of marketing philosophies that need to work in tandem for a product to succeed. There's product presence and product awareness. Presence is the ability for a product to be in the minds of the public and potential buyers. See a meme about Overwatch or Marvel Rivals? That's presence. In Outlaws' case, it would be them pointing out that you can pet different animals so 100 people on Twitter go, "Aww." See someone wearing an Outlaws shirt? That too is presence. Then there's awareness, which I see as a potential buyer's knowledge of the product. Now they're interested, so in order to seal the deal, we need to make sure they know what the product is and why they want to buy it. That's what trailers accomplish, early previews, blog posts, and a myriad other things. Product awareness is fickle because at some point it's out of your control. Remember Forspoken and the line that everyone heard and went, "Ooh." too. I'm sure the team behind that game were confident in what they were releasing, but alas, when that trailer didn't land, it set a precedent for the game's future sales and even their future trailers, as said future trailers featured the protagonist Frey talking far less, at times not saying a word. Now let's consider Ubisoft's standing when they were marketing Outlaws. Ubisoft had been known as the open world formulaic slop developer for a while, and while I don't believe that to be true, let's not kid ourselves. Their reputation wasn't kind, especially after games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Watch Dogs Legion left a sour taste in players' mouths for being bloated and overambitious respectively. Outlaws from the outset was also starting on the back foot because for a casual Star Wars fan like myself, I was wholly confused that they would make a game that featured no Jedi. Maybe I'm alone here, but half the reason I like Star Wars in the first place is because the Force and lightsabers are dope as shit, and if the game were to win me over, then it would need to show something truly special. For a lot of others, many expected it to be the normal open world formula with a coat of Star Wars paint over top of it, and you know what? If that's what they wanted to make, then that's fine. But if I were Ubisoft, my goal in showcasing the game for the first time would be highlighting from the get-go what makes the game unique from other open worlds, presenting said world as a backdrop and not the main attraction. The first we saw of Outlaws was an entirely CGI trailer, and for a game that we're supposed to, play, it felt a little off. But despite the negative reception, people clearly were still open-minded, because when they finally showed gameplay, there was a generally positive reception. I, however, have my own issues with these previews. I think the first issue is that the trailer immediately opens with an outpost. I get it, we want to show off the combat and stealth first, because that's where a majority of your time will be spent, but I found it, admittedly with the benefit of hindsight, to be such a weak move because it's not where the game's strengths are. To put my cards on the table a bit too early, Outlaws excels in world building and exploration, especially when you're in the cities, as there is life in every corner. The game is comfortably split between two stages at all levels: the social exploration, where you learn about locations, people, and gather information, and the execution, which is where you actually break into the hidden stash you aren't supposed to know about, steal the contraband you overheard a conversation about at the bar. The exploration phase is what makes Outlaws unique, and it's where it's at its most fun, so hardly showcasing that part of the game is a shame. Fortunately, there were still times for things to be redeemed, however, there were some glaring issues that popped up when the game got into creators' hands. Ubisoft usually does early events like this, and most of the time it's positive, but in this case, there were still many who were skeptical, audiences included, who concluded that the game was the same Ubisoft open world slop that they were afraid of. Riding off the tails of that wave of skepticism would be Ubisoft announcing the season pass of the game, including story missions, cosmetic outfits, and future expansions for their single-player game. Look, I understand that a season pass is normal and all, but I seriously wonder why so many games like to showcase the DLC before it's out. Like, I haven't played the game yet. I don't know if I want more of it. Anyways, with these two slip-ups, it generally left audiences, myself included, feeling skeptical towards the game. When reviews finally launched, it seemed that the game was just fine. And these days, just fine is really tough. I'll die on the hill that a 7 out of 10 is not a bad score. However, so many 8, 9, 10s come out each year that a 7 relatively isn't cutting it. I think these previews and reviews were a large reason why the game didn't sell on launch. Reviews noted the relatively uninspired mechanics and also noted how buggy the game was. Now, Ubisoft had never been the pinnacle of polish, but this was bad even for Ubisoft, and had the game not been so buggy, I believe the game would have sold more and reviewed better. We'll talk about that bugginess more, but it's important to note for now that Ubisoft did sort of learn their lesson, as when they delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows twice, they cited the premature release of Outlaws as a motivating factor. I also think that, generally online, we saw a lot of people pointing out how bad the AI was, how buggy the game was, and how bland the open world formula had felt. While I don't think these criticisms were indicative of the whole game, the problem for consumers was that's primarily what was shown. Because these sections of the game were unpolished, it was easy to clip farm that part of the game and blissfully forget about the parts that were done well. Especially in this current internet age where, realistically, unless it's a widely beloved classic, no one wants to hear how great a product is. Often, when I talk about marketing and consumer reactions to products, I get told that I'm blaming gamers. That somehow I think it's the public's fault a game fails. I got a lot of this criticism in my Forspoken video, so for the sake of clarity, no, I do not think we as consumers failed this game, and no, I do not think a consumer is to blame when a product fails. Pointing out when potential buyers don't like something or explaining why those buyers were potentially misled through poor marketing is not me putting the onus on that buyer. It's simply a symptom of a greater marketing mishap. Do I wish Outlaws had performed better? Yeah, I think the game has a lot of great qualities. Do I consider that the player's fault? Absolutely not. But, as I also mentioned with Forspoken, marketing isn't everything. If the game was great in spite of that marketing, it would still sell well and review better, because word of mouth would likely spread. We can look at Outlaws itself to understand why that didn't happen and how that could have happened. Title card, Underworld. There's a specific criticism I had for Outlaws after finishing the game, which is that it takes a while to get going. The opening is fast-paced and fun, but once you land on Tashara, there isn't much in the way of story setup until you leave that moon. Initially, I felt this was poor pacing, but I now realize that this opening act saw setting up the story as a secondary goal, with the main attraction being distraction. Most of the mission structure here will force you to move into a common loop we see in side quests, that being information gathering, contract brokering, and closing deals. The reason it's placed here is twofold. The first is to force players to see Outlaws' true strength, which is its societies, and the second is to show the benefits of moving up in the Underworld. As far as I'm concerned, this is where the meat of the game is, and if you're like me, you left the main story on the back burner as you climb the criminal ranks. There are 4 planets you can explore: Tashara, which is actually a moon, Tatooine, Kijimi, and Akiva, though you have to complete the story on Tashara before you are given free reign to explore the rest of the galaxy. For as much as these worlds are all detailed, faithful, and fun to explore, and space is about as interesting as it could be, the best parts of the galaxy are the small slices of society. I don't like calling these places cities or locations because they are more than that, and elicit a more fitting term. These are communities, townships, social circles, and while the physical design of these hubs is top-notch, and given Ubisoft's track record that's no surprise, the real beauty is in seeing how these people interact with each other. Different factions have districts that they call home, the Empire is constantly harassing anyone doing honest work, which means most people aren't honest. And Outlaws sells the idea of being in a dog-eat-dog world, where no one can be trusted and everyone is out for themselves. When I first arrived at Miragana, a fresh, wide-eyed outlaw, I knew I had to meet with someone named Gorak, the head of the Pikes, one of the game's 4 syndicates. I didn't know where to start, and after being beckoned over by someone near the entrance to his cantina, he offered to let me in with a VIP pass, assuming I gave him some credits. I thought, why not? I have the change to spare, and I marched forward. I asked the bartender where the VIP area was, and she laughed in my face, saying VIP cards don't exist, and that I was clearly swindled. I went back to the entrance to give that guy a piece of my mind, and alas, he was never seen again. A similar encounter happened when looking for a gambling ring. I asked someone where the parlor was, and they said I'd need credits to get the information out of him. I decided to look for myself and save the money, not trusting him, and wouldn't you know it, that son of a bitch was sitting directly in front of the door to the parlor. Moments like these sell the kind of greasy individuals that live here just as much as the Imperial officers offering to clear a wanted level in exchange for credits. What further cements these cities as communities is how much value is placed on information. Credits can do most of the talking, but those aren't easy to come by, so most of the time it's what you know, who you know, and whose good side you're on that'll be your bartering currency. You can unlock special discounts by helping out store owners, give syndicates information in exchange for their favor. Connections you've made will serve you down the line, and how much different syndicates like you will influence how much money you get from their jobs, what areas you can enter, and what rewards you get for your loyalty. The complicated bit has to do with what I mentioned earlier. Credits don't come easy. Whenever you complete a contract, another buyer will ask for the goods instead. This buyer always pays more than your current broker, sometimes double, but in return, the syndicate that hired you won't be happy being double-crossed. Do you prioritize your reputation or cash? Why don't we take a look at who rules the different parts of the Underworld to find our answer. The Ashiga call Kijimi home for their hive mind. They are extremely loyal to each other, rarely leaving their home world, and are known to work closely with the Crimson Dawn. The Crimson Dawn are your stealth faction. If someone hit you, you can bet it was one of the syndicates, but if you don't know who, then it was probably them. With eyes and ears around every corner, Crimson Dawn specializes in throwing their power around in plain sight, blending in with most crowds. The Pike Syndicate are far less concerned with being seen, as their leader Gorak sits atop the largest cantina in Miragana, commanding those under him to do his bidding. The Pikes are the closest we get to seeing our traditional idea of a criminal syndicate. Loyalty is appreciated, but for many, the bottom line is what truly calls the shots. Finally, the Hutts, run by Jabba himself, have a near monopoly of Tatooine, leveraging their influence to maintain their power and expand their leader's collection of rare creatures. You'll become plenty familiar with these syndicates throughout your journey, as it's almost impossible to do anything in Outlaws without the syndicates having a reaction to it. Win a card game in Pike territory, they see you as a high roller, and thus think more of you. Get caught trespassing and disturbing the peace in that same area? Now they see you as unpredictable and untrustworthy. Oftentimes, you'll be helping one syndicate screw over another, which means stealth is almost always advised. The rare time syndicates don't try to seize power from each other is when battling the biggest syndicate of them all, the Empire. The Empire and their legion of stormtroopers that patrol each planet cast a militaristic shadow over most of the world, justifying the need for an underworld, away from the constant surveillance of the Empire. They often put up the biggest fight, but also offer the greatest loot, and their power is indicated in gameplay through a wanted system, something exclusive to their faction. The wanted system in Outlaws never amounts to more than an inconvenience unless you want it to be. I'll admit that there is some fun in running from them, but I never personally enjoyed it that much. Fortunately, the Empire has more entertaining things for me to focus on, like their massive bases that act as small dungeons for Kay to work through. These are a dream to move through the first time, and even the second time. However, it exposes an issue with some of the contracts in Outlaws, which is that they become a tad repetitive. I had one contract where I needed to sneak into an Imperial base and swipe some data. The outpost I approached didn't have a direct way in, however there was a secret entrance on either side that could get me in without being spotted. Once inside, you'll need to be careful not to be spotted by cameras, and once you have the files, find an escape route. The problem? I just described every single contract like this. Other contracts see you delivering goods from one end of the map to another. While the pickup locations can be different, the drop-off is almost always the same, and the gameplay itself, just riding your speeder from point A to B, is the same. Breaking into a syndicate's headquarters to steal information or supplies, same deal as the Empire contracts. The set dressing itself changes sometimes, but otherwise, these are all the same. Smuggler contracts where you venture into space are fun the first time, but again, they become repetitive and for no good reason. I wonder why there weren't more mix-ups. One mission sees you stealing data for the Pikes, but the person who helps you scout the area is actually working with the Crimson Dawn, and is asking you to either betray them or risk your life fighting them. You might be wondering if I lied when I said contracts don't do this, and no, the difference with this particular contract is that it is mandatory to progress the story. It would be great to have some contracts where we break someone out of a syndicate holding cell, having to clear a path for them once they escape. Maybe have distraction contracts where in order to provide an opening for someone, we have to go to either the Empire or an opposing syndicate and cause havoc for 3 minutes, putting us in a survival context. Obviously, these would become repetitive after some time too, but the guidelines for when something should or should not be repetitive when we have Radiant quests like this is as follows. Is the repetition clear by the time you obtain all the contracts have to offer? In the case of Outlaws, there's rewards for reaching maximum rank with all the syndicates, and said rewards are pretty good. So I wanted to do it, and by the time I finished all of them, I found myself nauseated by how many times I snuck into the same Imperial base, how many times I drove from one end of the map to the other. It's not like the main story will get you there faster. In fact, a lot of the missions see the other factions for some reason or another being displeased with what you do. I think we need more variety if we're going to make ranking up the different factions take this long. This becomes a twofold issue when we look at the actual mechanics of the game, but I want to remain focused on what it means to operate in the Underworld, because thankfully, it's not just contracts. You can also help in dynamic events around the world. Maybe some syndicates are being pinned down by the Empire, or syndicates are pinning down the locals. Intervening might piss somebody off, but you'll get some coin for it. Sometimes it's as simple as racing with somebody on your speeder, but if there's one thing we love more than Ubisoft games, it's gambling, baby! Sabak is a card game you can engage with in different parlors around the world. It's about building a pair of the lowest number. You have credits you can spend to draw a new card, being unable to hold more than 2, and trying to, within 3 rounds, build a better hand than your opponent, because if you win, you get all your spent credits back. There's a bit more depth, but I don't think it's necessary to miss the forest for the trees here. The point is that this small game offered way more fun than I thought it would, especially because you can build a deck of 3 booster cards and find ways to cheat. Nyx can look at another person's cards, Kay can swipe 2 cards when drawing, and these cheats and ways to tip the game scales in your favor make the game way more interesting, and allow the game to be a bit more influenced by skill rather than luck. It's things like this that fulfill the fantasy of being on the run, constantly looking for a quick buck and being wrapped up in the chaos of the world. Alternatively, these societies offer moments of downtime too. I don't care how basic it is, but having different restaurants you can visit with Nyx fighting over the last bite goes miles for making me feel like this world was made with love. And I certainly think more love was put into these smaller interactions than some of the larger mechanics. I had more fun walking into a cantina, admiring the music, the atmosphere, and listening to people's conversations more than I did actually shooting people. And I think a lot of this comes down to the audio design. It's one thing to have a cantina look populated, but it's another to make it feel populated. And this goes for the cities too. Spend any amount of time walking through the streets and you'll notice all the different sounds and interactions around you. The game sells a vibe exceptionally well, and this applies to exploring the larger world too, though to a lesser degree. Part of what makes Kay a good scoundrel is the ability to blend in with her surroundings, so allowing her to both visually and audibly be drowned out by the surrounding atmosphere brings that idea home. If Star Wars Outlaws leaned into this outlaw lifestyle more, I might be more inclined to love it, but unfortunately, the other stage of the aforementioned gameplay loop sees us engaging in mechanics and systems that feel utterly outdated. The core gameplay of Outlaws struggles with a few things, the biggest being depth and presentation. Let's look at the presentation because it was something that subtly bothered me throughout my entire playthrough. As mentioned, not being seen is beneficial, as no one can pin your actions to you, so stealth and thus stealth takedowns are incredibly important to nail. Kay hits hard, I mean she knocks people out with one punch even when they are wearing helmets, except with all due respect, based on these animations, she is throwing punches that would struggle to dent butter. Most of these animations lack impact. They're kind of slow. Sometimes it feels like punches don't even perfectly connect. And sometimes she grabs a guard's head using magic? I mean, look, I don't think the choreography itself is bad, but it's simply how flaccid it all feels in motion. This lack of animation polish extends to some of the other facets of the game too, and it leads to one of the larger criticisms with gameplay as a whole, which is that a lot of the lacking depth could be excused if it just felt good to use, but there were always enough speed bumps in the road to label the whole thing bumpy and slightly unpleasant. Using your speeder is simple, just press a button and it teleports behind you, but it has to drive to your exact location when you press the button, and sometimes it'll take its sweet old time getting to you, and you can't jump on it halfway. You need to wait for it to get to the location before you can ride it. Every time you jump, there is a strange judder that happens, where it feels like the camera is not keyframed correctly for it. I do want to mention that this is only what's here now, and on launch there were even more issues, like not maintaining a crouch after climbing, not being able to bring picked up weapons with you anywhere, and there were more glitches than before, like your speeder just flat out leaving you. Look, I don't mind glitches too much, and some of them were even consistently funny, like when Nyx would sprint to catch up to Kay, colliding with an object and sending it barreling across my screen, at times during a cutscene, and fuck me, this is actually one of the funniest moments I've had in a game in such a long time.
Got the data pad right here.
Like, this is the kind of shit that if I saw as a developer, I would just leave it in, man. It's gold. Back to actually offering criticism, the point I'm making here is that when the jank is present at all times, it makes it hard to cut the game any slack. And in the case of our first point, stealth, it's even harder because it's primarily all you do. Most stealth encounters see you with very few tools. You can only use Nyx to distract guards, attack them, which leaves them stunned, and use a silent blaster shot to incapacitate them, though this ability is on a cooldown recharged faster by getting 2 takedowns. Nyx also has the ability to pull levers, activate bombs, sabotage alarms, and cause other distractions within your vicinity. I think the problem with stealth was largely how easy it is. The AI here, while better than it was on launch, is still generally dumb, deaf, and blind, meaning there isn't much challenge in how you approach enemies. I did like one mix-up where a silent shot can stun an elite enemy who can't be taken out in stealth, except, well, they can, you just need to get the upgrade. Generally, the most fun I had in stealth was when working together with Nyx, who by the way is just so cute, oh my god, I love him. But seeing 2 guards and planning that Nyx will attack one while I get the other was satisfying, but that's about as much as we get here. Aerial takedowns are here, but that's as far as it ever goes. Outside of that, it's the usual fare. We crouch in tall grass to hide ourselves, and when indoors, tall grass is swapped for thick smoke, which while conceptually cool, is significantly less believable. The biggest concern was the desire for more. I wondered why there wasn't a cover system, why we didn't have more complex hiding spots, a prone feature, disguises. Hell, we actually get an Imperial disguise, but it doesn't really work that well, and overall, I just wanted more, even if I was having fun with what's here. I'll admit that a lot of the fun for me came from the vibe. It's not how we're doing something, it's what we're doing, and what we're doing is entering an Imperial base while avoiding cameras and sightlines, which is tense because if you get caught, then you know how chaotic it quickly gets. There's something so unsettling about the siren that plays when an Imperial base catches sight of you. It immediately fills me with a sense that the whole Empire will be collapsing in on me, and half the time that fear is right. When stealth inevitably fails, as I believe the game intends for, which we'll get to later, you engage in the combat, which has a lot of the same issues with stealth. The whole time, you'll you'll likely be having fun, but the back of your mind will be wishing for more. Why can't we shoot while climbing, which would make for more interesting combat and puzzle solutions? Why can't we use human shields, throw grenades back at enemies? Again, a proper cover system! The lack of a cover system in stealth was mildly excusable because you can still hide behind cover without being locked there, but in combat, when a lot of said combat devolves into being a cover shooter, not having a dedicated system feels even more out of place. With that said, the gunplay does feel good. Most weapons have impact and there's multiple variations you can introduce to the blaster that offer different solutions to different problems. Ion bolts are effective against shields and droids, heavy shots will do greater damage at the cost of ammo and cooldown, and the regular shot is tried and true. Within each of these trees are further adjustments. The heavy shot can be modified to be like a grenade with a large blast radius but a heavy drop-off. The ion shot can be configured to be like a shotgun, easily the most useful, and the regular shot can be changed to have a fully automatic mode at the cost of damage. Using dropped enemy weapons spices things up too, especially when you unlock the ability to carry some of the larger miniguns, which just shred everything in their way. You heal yourself with stim shots that are always abundant, and generally, if you're even mildly competent on a controller, you'll find it pretty easy. I only ever died when I wanted to, such as being spotted and wanting to restart an encounter, though I did refrain from doing that most of the time. There is one unique aspect to combat, and that's the Deadeye skill, allowing you to mark 3, eventually 5 targets, and take them out in rapid succession. I'd be lying if I said this wasn't executed super well, and the animations sell this the most. I was a bit disappointed to see that the Deadeye meter is only filled by taking damage, acting as a way to get back in the fight when you're behind. However, the problem I find with that is, it punishes a skilled player. There were plenty of encounters where I was able to breeze through the whole thing without filling the meter, which to me feels like I'm missing out on the cool stuff because I'm playing with too much precision. I should also mention that it's not like I'm a pro that's steamrolling the game either. If adrenaline filled with each enemy killed, then that would solve this, and while yes, allowing someone who's already winning to get more of a free win button is an issue for balance, well, it's clear balance wasn't a concern anyways, or else they wouldn't let you delete 5 enemies. Another area where the Deadeye plays a large role is in speeder chases. Your speeder is the primary means of traversing the map, and at times, pirates, syndicates, or the Empire will try to chase you down on their own speeders. You cannot shoot back at them freely, only when the adrenaline meter fills up, which is done by taking damage. Let's put a pin in the fact that you can't freely shoot for now, and focus on the fact that because your only means of defense is based on how much damage you take, a speeder chase can only go on for so long. Eventually, you won't have any more health to trade for damage, and you can't fix your speeder with a stim shot. This makes speeder chases more of a nuisance than anything, and now going back to being unable to shoot freely, the reason developers gave for this was the corporate equivalent of "fuck me, can't be bothered." What a disappointment! The speeder itself is fine to use. It has reasonable speed, can have that speed upgraded, and generally when it works, it's fine. I was disappointed that we didn't get the ability to use other speeders, and I was further disappointed at how little there is to do on it aside from the occasional drift and jump. Unlike stealth and combat, it's not like there are easy fixes, but freely shooting in speeder battles, being able to steal someone else's speeder seem like no-brainers to me. Once on foot, you have a grappling hook, some climbing abilities, and that's it, and it's fine. I don't think movement itself needs much more, but some synergy with other systems, i.e. being able to shoot while climbing, would go a long way in making the overall gameplay more enjoyable. Finally, traversing the final frontier is done really well. Your ship, the Trailblazer, handles well and has different weapons you can outfit it with, and each landmark in space has enough distance between it to make space seem large, but not inconveniently so. Within each system, there are different environmental obstacles like debris and nebulas that make getting around and the inevitable dogfights varied. I did find that the basic mechanic of shooting got tired quickly, especially when each different weapon is fired in virtually the same way, but when it comes to faithful ship combat, there isn't much more you can do. To tackle the final aspect of general gameplay, we can look to the puzzles, which were actually incredibly satisfying. The game lacks official puzzles, so to speak. Most environmental puzzles will be asking Nyx to hold something open while you shoot whatever's behind it. But the lockpicking and slicing minigames are genuinely great. Lockpicking sees you using your data spike to crack a lock by completing a minor rhythm game. It was a refreshing take on lockpicking, and while I still think the Skyrim lockpicking is the best, this is an excellent alternative. Slicing operates in a similar category. In order to hack electronics, we can do what is essentially Wordle, but with symbols, and while it is basic, again, it's fun. Eventually, you can get a kit that splits the symbols into groups, and one of the groups always contains a correct symbol, which adds a layer of depth to the slicing. In the beginning, when it's just 3 symbols, it's super easy, but once you get up to 5, it becomes becomes a genuinely time-consuming process, and I loved it. I think when most of the gameplay mechanics start with me saying there isn't much and end with me saying I wanted more, there's a problem on our hands. I should clarify that in all of these cases, it was the fundamentals that needed work. Outlaws still builds upon the bare fundamentals well, and the way they incentivize it is well thought out. Rather than having a skill tree like, well, any other Ubisoft game of the last 10 years, you instead get abilities by first encountering an expert and then through completing challenges for that person. These challenges are never too difficult, and I imagine the intention was to complete them alongside whatever other quest you're doing. And I think it's a great means of progression because 1, it encourages the player to play the game in different ways, and 2, it reinforces the theme of connections being what prevails in this world. Knowing the right people will give you access to sabacc cheats, extra health, speeder abilities, and more. Now granted, this system does run into an issue where the benefits certain experts give don't fully line up with their occupation. For example, the Slicer has 2 abilities that actually help you with slicing, but they also offer an ability to dampen the sound of your footsteps. They enable bonus damage when shooting an enemy from stealth and also allow you to use concussive smoke bombs, which feels a bit out of place. The mechanic has 2 abilities that upgrade your speeder, but also allows Nyx to find treasure chest, and 2 upgrades that expand how many things you can carry. The Scavenger has a single ability that actually helps you scavenge, and the rest are stealth and tool related upgrades. I might be looking at these the wrong way, because in fairness, some of these experts won't be met until decently late into the game, but I never felt like any of the experts I met taught me more than one ability within their field of expertise. To immediately counter my own criticism, I understand that there's a challenge with this system. If there are upgrades that we don't want the player to have too late or too early, then they need to be unlocked through one of the characters you meet early. If we put all of the scavenging upgrades behind Timon, a character you are likely to meet near the end of your journey, then the player will be ill-equipped for most of the game. There's also the issue of, if we have a character that specializes in stealth, like a Crimson Dawn associate, then we have an issue where the player that only wants to engage in stealth will talk to one person and not bother with any other mechanics, because stealth becomes so effective to the point that they have no reason to engage with anything else. If we allow players to mostly become a jack of all trades as the game progresses, then we have a smoother progression and a K that is more narratively synchronized with the gameplay. So I'm sure you're noticing a bit of a problem here. I mentioned that I like the gameplay, and yet it seems like every facet of the gameplay is bare bones, lacking obvious features, and is riddled with glitches, and you know what? That's absolutely true. However, what is also true is that in spite of it all, the game can be plenty of fun because more often than not, there's satisfaction to be found in the fantasy. I truly felt like the thief I was supposed to be, and what surrounds the gameplay, the music, the environmental design, the organic stories the game has the capacity to tell, picks up the slack. I don't want to glaze the environments too much, but it really is the highlight of the game, and what constantly kept me interested in both the larger worlds as a whole and the back alley gambling rings. It can't be understated that this is clearly where a lot of the resources went, for better or worse. I believe this environmental design carries a lot of the campaign too. The game is comfortably divided by members of the crew, with each member serving as a chapter on a particular planet. As you complete these quests, you'll be taken around to the most interesting locations and even explore some smaller interior levels, and these were always great because it's when the narrative, gameplay, and world design all come together at the same time. I mentioned that the time on Tashara is relatively drawn out, but truthfully, not a ton happens there because so much of it is introducing you to the Underworld. However, on the other planets, things move fast, and there are different variations of heists for you to pull off, and especially by the end of the game, there are some really fun mix-ups. Most of the missions begin in stealth and naturally devolve into open combat. Most of the time this will be because you get caught, and shockingly, Outlaws was the only game where I felt I was taking away from the experience by save scumming. Save scumming, for those who don't know, is a practice where players reload saves to avoid undesirable outcomes. Think about saving before a big decision in case you regret it, or reloading a save until the Pokemon you encountered is shiny. In stealth games, this refers to reloading a save when you get caught. This, for some people like me, makes games more fun, because I like having a flawless stealth run, looking at the patrols and layouts as pieces to a puzzle that I need to solve. Outlaws is one of the few games where I felt that it made sense to just roll with it when things got hairy most of the time. This is because the game clearly wants you to fumble a lot, a sentiment reinforced by the story and the upgrades. Abilities that allow you to stay in stealth upon messing up, the lack of any kind of scouting tools, and the narrative that paints Kay as a bit of a fuck up. Kay's good, but she's not the best, so when I mess up and the whole base is on alert, I appreciate following that story to see where it ends. Ultimately, I think Outlaws suffers from a lack of polish in a lot of its animations, making it feel as though the game is always operating at half-mast, like things just aren't quite where they needed to be. And while this doesn't ruin the experience, it also doesn't help it when coupled with foundational mechanics that lack features many would consider to be an industry standard. Frankly, not having a cover system in what is essentially a cover shooter with stealth elements feels archaic. Not being able to steal other people's speeders feels needlessly restrictive. The quality gap between the actual gameplay and the themes of the Underworld make it feel as though the idea for a game where you play as an outlaw traversing the criminal network of the galaxy came first, and then when it came to the more action-packed gameplay, Ubisoft just sort of threw their hands up, saying, fuck it, throw in some basic stealth and shooting mechanics. Except for Nyx, everything with Nyx is awesome, and honestly, I think he's my favorite companion in any of the Star Wars games, even more than BD1, that's right, I said it. Fortunately, the story this time around does do a good job of picking up the slack of the gameplay, specifically because of the individual level designs. Sneaking through massive Imperial space stations or crawling through an old Clone War era droid factory were highlights of the game, and the surrounding plot was very engaging, even if there are some minor issues with the presentation of that story. While I don't think the game kept me guessing at every turn, and its chapter structure does become abundantly apparent, there are enough mix-ups and well-executed moments for me to feel satisfied by its conclusion. But we gotta tackle something first, and unfortunately, it's Kay herself. She's written well, but modeled far less so. There was some controversy surrounding the game both before and during launch, because the voice actor and face model for Kay looks like this, yet in-game, Kay looks like this. Bit of a stark difference, and I don't want to argue against it looking bad. I think it does, especially in moment-to-moment gameplay, but I want to clarify that I don't think this was intentional. Some corners of the internet believe that Kay looks this way because of some ideological agenda that Ubisoft is trying to push, which would make sense if 1, it wasn't absolutely insane, and 2, it wasn't completely contradicted by Massive Entertainment and Ubisoft's history of making generally ugly characters. I say this with all due respect, but Ubisoft's facial quality and animations have gone significantly downhill over the years, especially animation, but let's just focus on facial quality for now. I think of my favorite characters, Arno, Evie Fry, and compare them to the likes of Alexios and Cassandra. It's just night and day. I even say this as someone who likes Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Kay follows suit. The face doesn't look natural and hangs in the uncanny valley, and the reason I don't think this was done intentionally to Kay is because if we look at most of the other characters, we get similar situations. Ironically, the best looking facial models are the ones that aren't human. Facial expressions never quite look right. Certain angles make the characters look incredibly unphotogenic, which might be a point for realism, but not in the best way. Now let's look at facial animation. I'll play one of the opening cutscenes and take a close look at the faces when people speak.
Got no crew, Kay. And you keep going it alone with high-risk scores that just go sideways.
Their lips are hardly synced up, and look, I did some 3D animation back in the day, I know how time-consuming it is, but this is hardly up to standard and flat out doesn't look good. Characters in pre-rendered cutscenes look great, Kay included, but the moment it turns back to the in-game cutscenes, it's a sore sight. However, in the defense, if you could call it that, of Massive Entertainment, they have never been all that great at it. Let's look at the last two major titles, The Division 2 and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, and we can see that in both titles, there are the same issues with lip syncing and faces leaning into the uncanny valley. I'll give the uncanny valley of Pandora a break because the people are blue, they obviously won't look too human, but the point I'm making, for as admittedly rude as it is that Massive Entertainment did not make Kay's face model bad for any agenda. They've just always kind of sucked at making faces. With that out of the way, let's talk about the actual story here, because moving past how distractingly poor the lip syncing was, I enjoyed it plenty. We open with Sliro, leader of Zarek Besh, a new syndicate, talking to representatives of the other 4 syndicates before killing them, I assume to send a message. The message to the syndicates and us is the same. Sliro is a threat, and as far as an opening cutscene goes, this was done decently well. It certainly had me intrigued. Then we wake up as Kay Vess, a young scoundrel who was taken in by the owners of the cantina she lives in, Bram, after her mother abandoned her during her formative years. All her mother left was a coin to remember her by, and this left Kay with a thirst for independence, because if there's one lesson her mother taught her, it's that you can't always count on someone being there. The theme of Kay's mother will be brought out throughout the story in the form of different flashbacks, but for now, we can look at how the opening sets up the world. Kanto is stunning, especially on a night like this, and after doing some minor sneaking, we get word of a gig that could earn Kay enough credits to finally leave the planet and all its bad memories behind. The crew's mostly silent. The heist goes a little too perfectly. When we open the vault to see the riches inside, we find a rebel, and it's revealed that our heist crew was never going to pay us, and that this was all a ruse to break their friend out of Sliro's vault. Kay, being rightfully rightfully annoyed, gets knocked out by the rebels once an alarm is tripped. Kay wakes to Slero interrogating her before Nyx creates an opening for the pair to escape using one of Slero's ships, an old Trailblazer. This introductory heist sets the stage well and introduces a lot of the basic mechanics we'll be engaging with throughout the game. Narratively, I've always loved when a game goes full circle, and I particularly enjoyed returning to Slero's base once again in the late game. Kay jumps to the moon Tashara with a death mark on her and crashes the ship. Once reawakened, she gets introduced to the outlaw lifestyle, and with the help of a convenient friend Waka, eventually repairs the ship, though it's revealed that Waka intends to steal it. Waka is interrupted by the bounty hunter Vale, working for Slero and hoping to claim the death mark. However, in the ensuing chase, Kay is saved by a mysterious droid. Narrowly escaping back to the ship, she finds Jalen, a rich outlaw who wants Kay to form a crew and steal the fortune of one Mr. Slero, offering the help of his assistant battle droid ND5 to get the job done. Kay doesn't put up much of a fight, seeing as she has nothing to lose, and the rest of the plot follows her forming the team for the heist. She needs a slicer, a heavy, and a bomb expert, all acquired on different planets. The opening on Tashara moves quickly, which is appreciated, and while some had criticized that the game moves on too quickly from what is a large location, again, I think the intention is to make a name for yourself among the different syndicates alongside doing story content. All things considered, this was where I spent the most time. The only issue I have with this opening, and this is a problem for most of the game, is that the death mark is never as threatening as it seems. Kay has her name and face plastered over every billboard, TV screen, and bulletin board by the time she lands, and there are very few occasions where someone acknowledges the death mark she has. She walks into the sheriff's department with her photo plastered on the wall, and yet she doesn't recognize her. There was one occasion where the Crimson Dawn leader mentions it, but otherwise the death mark almost never comes up. I don't think the game would be necessarily improved by constantly hanging this over Kay's head. However, I do think there are ways for us to remind the player of the stakes without making it annoying, such as having some contractors ask us to pick up a package, but when we get there, it's actually an ambush by people wanting our mark. Without it, the death mark seems like an inconvenience at best, and even Vale isn't much of a threat outside of her introduction and when she tracks Kay down again on Tatooine. I understand the death mark is more of a plot device that allows Kay to be put in a desperate position, primed to accept Jalen's offer, but giving it some acknowledgement outside of people who already don't care or wouldn't backstab her would have helped. At this point, the story branches off, allowing us to go to Kijimi, Tatooine, or Akiva. Personally, I think the best order to play these is in the mentioned order, and that's because with this in mind, Kijimi offers a good follow-up to Tashara environmentally, and offers a break from the tension to get involved in the Ashiga's internal politics. It's here that we find our explosives expert, Ankh, who won't join us until we help her resolve her business on Kijimi. But once we do, we're moving on to Tatooine, where after finding Haas, the Heavy, he screws us by selling Nyx to Jabba. This mission was a ton of fun, and exemplified how difficult even the most basic of tasks are without our little friend helping us along the way. Kay's furious throughout most of this mission and risks her life just to save her friend, something I thought was exclusive to Nyx, but we'll later find out that this is a recurring character trait of hers. Kay does not abandon her friends, likely because she understands the pain of someone abandoning her. While this is happening, Kay runs into Vale, and the two are captured by Jabba and forced to do his bidding. We have an excellent fight against a Rancor and infiltrate an Imperial base. The two build a bit of a connection, and we find out that Vale doesn't seem to know everything about Slero's plans, to her dismay. Once the two are finished, Vale, as a means of paying back Kay's kindness, gives her a break, though she maintains that she will be back for her. As we wrap up on Tatooine, Jalen suggests that perhaps Kay will act as the Heavy, given that by now she has proven herself a good shot. The team moves onwards to Akiva to find their droid expert Gadik, an old friend of Kay's. A lot happens on Tatooine, far more than Kijimi, and I think Akiva, at least, the Gadik portion, is much simpler, allowing time for everyone to breathe and for the upcoming themes to settle in. ND5 is at our side throughout most of the story, and while he is reluctant to help Kay, he slowly begins to care for her, even asking how she is and wondering about her past. We help Gadik, who is now working with the Empire, by disabling some drones that are targeting the rebellion, which, if you'll remember from the opening, Kay isn't very fond of. As we finish up, we see that ND5 is acting a little strange, twitching and speaking oddly. This, as he later reveals, is a result of his power core draining. The following mission with ND5 sees us breaking into an old droid facility to find a specific part, and it's one of the best moments in the game. There's so much intrigue, the environment is designed so well, and we now have built a solid connection to ND5. ND will consistently tell Kay that it's just his time to go and that Jalen will find another droid, but Kay is too attached, and her refusal to not abandon anyone does help ND, but it means she has to work with some rebels too. I appreciate Kay's apprehension to working with rebels, not just here, but in the beginning of the story too. So many Star Wars products feature the rebels against the Empire, and yeah, war is sort of in the name, so it makes sense, but what makes Outlaws unique is that it operates in the background of that war. It's otherwise a story that wouldn't be written in the history books, so Kay refusing to be involved with the rebels feels like a meta way for Ubisoft to make the same statement, to say, we're gonna do our own thing. Later on, due to the rebels selling her out, her hatred for them and her categorization of them as just another syndicate feels accurate, at least considering her circumstances. I had hoped Kay's views were challenged more because, yes, the rebels do only care about their cause, but it's not like that cause is even mildly comparable to the Underworld that only serves its own profits. I think Akiva ends up being a longer planet because of the 2 quests back to back, assuming you played it in the order I decided. But because the Power Core mission takes place in its own unique location, and because the story generally picks up speed after, I think it works. Our rebel contact Asara offers to help us hit Sliro's vault, and it's revealed by Jalen that now, all we need is a slicer, and the best slicer in the galaxy is none other than Kay's mother, Rico. Rico and Kay's relationship is portrayed well throughout the game. She's constantly treating Kay like an accomplice in training rather than a child. And while I understand that she would teach Kay about the only life she knows, we never see Rico discipline Kay about anything not crime related. It implies that maybe Rico didn't want to raise Kay, at least not alone. But the absence of any father figure leads me to believe that Rico wasn't ready to raise a child on her own, and once believing that Kay wasn't cut out for this life, decided to leave her behind. Kay and Rico's discussions are shockingly realistic, and the sensitive topics are approached with care. Rico's decisions are contextualized and given a logical explanation, but it's never presented as justified or forgivable. Kay constantly gives her the cold shoulder, and it's clear that the wounds Rico left behind never really healed. As the two are forced to work together, Rico has to go off the grid for a moment, and Kay almost accidentally calls her mom before catching herself.
What? Go where? Hello? Rico.
I also like that they never really reconcile, at least not entirely. The crew has one more task before they can hit Sliro's vault, and it's to steal a keycard directly from him, and do so by intercepting a meeting he has on an Imperial ship. This is another excellent mission, and there's specifically one moment that made me shit bricks. And yeah, look, I get it. The Vader reveal is getting a little old these days, but I just like that Outlaws doesn't overdo it. He just shows up, uses the Force to aura farm on Sliro, and then just leaves. And the best part is, listen to this.
Kay, what do you see?
I'm not sure. I can't.
Kiddo, eye on the score.
Yeah, okay. We got a big problem. Sliro just met with someone who... I don't know, he just tore the room apart.
This is such a cool idea that someone like Kay, someone unfamiliar with the inner workings of the Empire and the different legends within it, would have no idea who Vader is or what he does. It amplifies the scale of the world and how disconnected the day-to-day scoundrels of the galaxy are from the larger conflict. Finally, I respect how short this segment was. Vader didn't overstay his welcome, which is important when Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor already did a massive Vader reveal twice. We learned throughout this mission that Sliro's syndicate, Zarek Besh, is actually an Imperial intelligence project, aimed at keeping watch of the syndicates and rebels and wiping them out. Sliro has a lot of information already, especially on the rebels. With the keycard secure, the time to hit Sliro's vault is upon us, and the team meets at Brahm's Cantina to debrief and say any final thoughts. I like being able to talk to your team, and especially not talk to Rico. We learn in this scene that Jalen's motivation wasn't money, especially when he had already seemed to have enough, sending us gifts with each completed chapter, but instead, he wanted control of Zarek Besh. Fortunately, we're still getting paid, so not too many questions are asked. Without time to waste, the team gets in, gets the cash, but more importantly, the heist goes smoothly until Sliro shows up. But Vale steps in to help us escape. Once escaping, Jalen reveals that we did not in fact steal Sliro's fortune, but rather all of his information on the Empire. His plan from the beginning was to steal Zarek Besh from Sliro, and now that the crew has served their purpose, he orders ND5, still under Jalen's control, to knock Kay out. The crew is able to wake Kay up, and she decides it's more important to rescue ND5 from Jalen's control using a tool Gadeek made. I've mentioned this before, but despite being an incredibly risky play, it makes a lot of sense because both Kay and the player have formed a bond with ND5, and as established in every interaction with Rico, Kay knows the pain of abandonment and won't abandon someone else. Using a disguise the first time we do so, Kay sits in on a meeting between Sliro, Jalen, and Vader, where it's revealed that Jalen is actually Sliro's older brother, the one he had referenced in the opening, and kills him. Kay then tries to jab ND5 with a device that will override Jalen's control, but botches it, leading to one of the best encounters in the game. ND5 is shown throughout most of the story to be a stoic badass, no doubt aided by the fact that he can take multiple bullets, wears a dope trench coat, and assists us in battle on more than one occasion. But actually being on the other end of his wrath sells his power so much more than a cutscene could. It's a basic encounter, just stealthing around him, but if spotted, ND5 hauls ass towards you, and the stomps of his metal feet against the floor echoing as you try to nail an override lock was tense, fun, and everything I wanted from some kind of boss fight. It's crazy to think that when it comes to a lot of the Star Wars games, they respect power a lot. And much like our Vader encounter in Jedi Fallen Order, we're able to win by simply outsmarting our opponent rather than physically overpowering them. A fantastic way to end the game. Once ND5 is saved, he kills Jalen, and the two, joined by a captured Asara, make a break for it. Once escaping, Kay decides to give the codex to Asara to help the rebels, makes a copy to pay off Vale, and sets off with ND5 to find another way to make ends meet. I was disappointed to not see a better ending for Kay. Like, I was half expecting to see that Kay was able to steal some credits on the way out, but I guess with DLC being on the roadmap before the game launched, then we can't ever have a happily ever after, or else there'd be little reason for Kay to get back out there. Overall, I think the story here was pretty solid. It moved quickly, had some great character interactions, and I really liked the way they handled Kay's mother and there's a post-credit scene where Kay rescues her mother and hints that she somewhat forgives her for what she did. Come on, man. I'm really conflicted on this. I think the idea of eventually forgiving a family member that screwed you over is fine, I guess, but I really dislike the way Rico's desertion is framed, because it presents her as not having entirely left. Essentially, the coin that Rico left with Kay was actually a tracker, meaning she was always watching Kay and keeping tabs on her. This indicates that she still cared, which, cool, I'm down for that. But the game teeters on the edge of saying that Rico was actually watching over her, almost framing her desertion as not being that bad. This is a difficult dynamic, finding a way to forgive a character while not forgiving their actions, and unfortunately for Outlaws, it falls into a trap where the character has more time to heal than the player. From Kay's perspective, she's had enough time to reconcile, and is maybe ready to move forward, especially under this new revelation that Rico still cared. Not enough to reach out, but still. From our perspective, this lady abandoned us not 10 hours ago, and to pretend like she didn't completely abandon us feels disingenuous. Yes, she still kept tabs, but life was still hard without her, and she is still a horrendous mother for leaving. Kay made a new family, she doesn't need Rico anymore. I think the game did this in order to give the audience a happy ending, and sure, but I think it undermines what makes Kay's character so appealing throughout the story, which is her morals. She is loyal to a fault because of her upbringing, she immediately writes off anyone who tries to screw her, and is generally a sloppy criminal. We can argue about whether Kay is a sloppy criminal in the canon all we want, but I believe the way the game is designed, plus all the scripted moments where Kay is almost caught or is outright caught, is evidence that she isn't the best at what she does. What I loved about Kay was that in spite of all of that, she was able to succeed in some regard. I think Ubisoft's story sometimes run into issues where the characters aren't given character flaws that result in consequences, but Kay does not fit this mold. Kay, so often growing up, was made to feel like a liability in her mother's eyes. As an adult, she continues to dig herself deeper into debt, and botches a score so bad that she gets a bounty on her head. Her mother only trained her in being a thief and then left. In spite of that, in spite of what her mother did, damn near forcing her into a life of crime, she was able to make something of herself and find new friends, new purposes, proving to herself that yes, it sucked not having her mother, but her actions prove that she never needed her in the first place. This post-credit scene feels like it walks all of this back. I imagine I may be reacting too harshly to this. Chances are, Kay simply has had enough time to see that she doesn't want anyone to feel the abandonment she felt, even the perpetrator of her own pain. But that admittedly logical explanation is at complete odds with the emotional side of me that just wishes Kay would let Rico rot. Honestly, at this point, I'm not even criticizing the game. I think I'm just working through some shit here. Let's just move on. Outlaw's story was good. I liked it. I found myself connecting with Kay very quickly, and that's no doubt aided by Nix, who's just the cutest little guy. I wish our crew was a bit more involved and talkative. We rescue Ankh, and she basically does nothing until the very end. I assume this is because the game has a non-linear structure, but I'm not sure what the benefits of that open structure is. It's a choice for the sake of choice. If we, on a linear path, traveled from planet to planet, we could have had more moments where the crew interacted with one another, instead of being strangers up until the final mission. Aside from that, I like the main story plenty, especially when the third act picked up, as it felt like one excellent set piece after another. Though I have my doubts it'll happen, I would be more than happy to see another adventure with Cave S. Thankfully, to some extent, that's what we got with the first of 2 expansions to the game, the first being Wildcard. This expansion takes place after the events of the main game, but is definitely positioned as a side story, not a continuation of the base game, which is fine, as it's still plenty of fun, and we still get some hints as to what happens after the credits roll. Gameplay is much the same, though I did find that the stealth segments were slightly trickier, and the exploration was a bit more interesting than the main game. We're tasked with infiltrating a high roller sabacc game. Once inside, we're set up and sold out by the Empire, and need to recover a mining moon that they had stolen in order to prevent a new empire from rising once the old one falls. A basic side story, but one that kept me engaged, especially when Outlaws this time leans a lot more into the strengths of the base game. The changes to investigations were rather minimal compared to the base game. Instead of instantly being able to hear a conversation, we can now hover over 1 or 2 of them to achieve the same effect. A small change that doesn't result in any massive shift, but I do think it's an improvement. Specifically, the whole chapter on the marijuana is done so well. We need to infiltrate a sabacc game, so to do so, we need to look the part, getting a nice new outfit, and we need to find out not just who is playing, but who we can reliably replace. When looking for a list of players, something generally kept secret, there are multiple ways of achieving that, and there are many different ways of finding the person you are looking for. In my case, I had a really cool moment where the person I talked to when walking in turned out to be the person I intended to replace, but I just didn't know it. It feels like a lot of other games would simply have the NPC only spawn in once you've met the needed requirements to confront them, and seeing that not be the case was really cool. I feel like the majority of the DLC was spent aboard this ship, and I think it's better for it. The atmosphere is top-notch, and it even shows a glimpse of the post-game dynamic between ND5 and K. Look at this, he even says hi to Nyx.
Hi, Nyx.
Once infiltrating the sabacc game, there is an interesting mechanic where we have to catch other players cheating, which is done by learning more about them in the lower floors, and knowing their tells, like clearing their throat or looking around before they try something sneaky. Our game is sabotaged, however, and in the ensuing escape, we team up with Lando to stop the Empire's plans. I won't bother going too far into the story because generally, there isn't much here that affects the wider plot. It's good, don't get me wrong, but there are virtually no criticisms or praises I could give it that I haven't already mentioned in regards to the main campaign. I did at least appreciate that there is a small conversation about Zarek Besh, telling us what happened to them.
Still can't believe Zarek Besh just collapsed like that.
I heard there's still a few of them around. Wonder what they're going to do next.
They won't last long, the way things are now.
If Wildcard shows us anything, it's that if given an opportunity to improve, a sequel to Outlaws could have been great. Honestly, so many of the issues in the base game are fundamental, meaning that there isn't much this DLC can do to win over anyone who didn't like the base game. But the moments where the shooting and stealth are pushed aside were some of the best moments in the game. Period. It truly showcases Outlaws at its best, and for that I can be grateful. There is a second DLC on the way, which I am looking forward to, but I won't wait to cover it, because I'm confident that much like this first DLC, it'll just be more of the base game, for better or worse. Overall, Outlaws is a game with heavy flaws. A lot of it comes down to simply not meeting the standards many have for open world games. Despite this world being one of the most open, it ends up feeling as linear as ever, seeing as you're restricted to one speed or one weapon most of the time, and are often re-entering locations. In spite of this, when it comes to presentation and vibes, something that can't be understated, Outlaws nails the feeling of being a scoundrel, and traversing the criminal underworld is an experience I think isn't obtained anywhere else. The detail in the different societies is staggering, and the score and sound design make being immersed as easy as it could be. Outlaws is an interesting case where Ubisoft is firing on all cylinders for the things they're good at, yet struggling even more in their weak spots. I come to similar conclusions when I cover games that were bad, but had potential, and it's something along the lines of wanting a sequel, wanting the game to have a better chance. I feel the same with Outlaws. If Outlaws had better gunplay and stealth, I could seriously see this being one of Ubisoft's best games in years. And I know, it's not so easy to make a good stealth or combat system, but I think Ubisoft has made great stealth systems in the past, and it's not absurd to expect better from them. They aren't an indie company, they have the budget, the talent, and the resources to make it happen, and I think they simply undervalued the fundamentals or weren't given enough time, something that seems to be a death blow for any promising game. Outlaws from the outset was a tough sell for casual Star Wars fans. A game where a lightsaber is never drawn and the Force is hardly present, especially in the wake of 2 excellent Jedi games, feels insane. Then, their marketing did nothing to dispel the market's concern that this would be just like any other Ubisoft game, but with a Star Wars coat of paint. Bad press wouldn't be enough to kill the game though, as plenty of games have succeeded in spite of bad reviews or controversy. But it didn't succeed. By Ubisoft's own admission, the game had underperformed. And I don't believe it was due to the marketing or controversy. Instead, it was the game itself that was the biggest factor in Outlaw's performance. Its stealth was some of the worst I've seen in recent Ubisoft, and its gunplay was fine, but lacked so much quality of life. Then, so much of what's expected in a sandbox, stealing other speeders, using other guns, was barely implemented or not implemented at all. Finally, there were so many glitches that it was hard for many to take the game seriously, and this was especially the case when it came to the game's AI, which is still pretty rough. I know it may seem like I'm contradicting myself. In the beginning of this video, I said that the marketing was the biggest reason Outlaws failed, and I want to clarify that I still hold that to be true, but as I hope I've shown, bad marketing in my experience almost never kills great games, as a great game can bounce back. Outlaws didn't, and it's because fundamental systems needed more depth, and its gameplay as a whole needed more polish. I loved Outlaws. I still think it's a good game. Not because these systems are acceptable, but because it presents such an excellent world that I am unable to look past the flaws and still enjoy the overall product. The bright side of this story is that Ubisoft learned their lesson. Assassin's Creed Shadows was delayed for a total of 5 months, and the launch of that game has been fantastic. Sure, an Assassin's Creed game in Japan is a bit of a layup, but so is a Star Wars game. The polish on Shadows compared to Outlaws is night and day, and I think that reflected heavily in the game's sales and reviews. As much as people don't agree with me, I think Ubisoft is a talented developer team. The suits that are running the company are dumb as bricks, don't get me wrong, but the people who are actually making these games are extremely talented and are capable of creating excellence. They just need to be enabled. Strict deadlines do not enable your talent. I'm not saying Ubisoft should take 10 years to make a game though, you can definitely overcook a product, but I think many people's standards for games quality-wise has raised, but the expectation for when those games come out hasn't. Yearly releases were exactly what drove series like Call of Duty into the ground, and there was a chance it could have done the same to Assassin's Creed. Games like Outlaws have so much potential, and the rush to get it out early resulted in both sales and quality standards not being met. It wasn't worth it, and if the game doesn't get a sequel, then it makes sense. But at least let this be a lesson, so it doesn't end up being a waste. Hi everyone, thank you for watching this video. I had a ton of fun making it. I know I've been a little more absent than usual. It's taken me a while to upload this video, and it's just because the beginning of this year, oh my god, man, I'm one of those people that I get sick like once every like year or two, and when I do, it takes me out. This year, I got sick in January, and then sick in February, and then had like a minor cold in March, and it was like, what the fuck is going on? And so I think I'm more than like 30 days now of not having a cold, and I'm just gonna count my fucking blessings, okay? And then last month I proposed to my now fiance, and so it was very, very busy for me. And so I kind of slipped behind on work, but I'm back on the ball now, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I really like talking about Outlaws. For the most part, I like talking about it because I like the game, but I also don't like talking about it because it is really disappointing how it all turned out, and I feel like Outlaws really had the potential to be something special, and Ubisoft fumbled the bag. Speaking of getting the bag, I want to shout out the patrons for donating to the channel and helping keep it afloat, especially during the months where I am not uploading as much because of whatever sickness or life events come up. And if you want to join, you can do so down below by clicking the link. It's just $5 a month to get a bunch of new videos early, and yeah, keeping it pretty simple. So just wanted to say thank you so much for watching, supporting everything, and yeah, thanks. You can follow my socials down below, and I hope you all have an excellent rest of your day. I love you guys. Take care.